Today, we're diving into the story of UPS Flight 2976, what should have been a totally routine cargo flight turned into an absolute catastrophe just moments after it left the ground. We're going to break down exactly what went wrong, the heartbreaking aftermath, and the really critical lessons that were learned about aviation safety. It's the kind of news that just stops you in your tracks. A UPS Airlines cargo flight has gone down, crashing right after takeoff from Louisville International Airport in Kentucky. A flight that happens every day suddenly became a national tragedy. So the big question is, how does a modern, sophisticated cargo plane just fall out of the sky so fast? To really get it, we've got to go back and look at those first few absolutely critical moments right after the wheels lifted off the runway. Okay, so this was UPS Flight 2976. It was a long-haul cargo plane, and its route was from Louisville all the way to Honolulu. Now, that destination is a really key detail here. A long flight over the Pacific means the plane was absolutely loaded with fuel, a factor that, as you'll see, played a huge role in what happened next. And it all happened just so fast. Moments after liftoff, the entire left engine completely tore away from the wing. Now, this wasn't just losing power. This was a catastrophic structural failure. The plane was instantly uncontrollable, and within seconds, it slammed into the ground right near the airport. But believe it or not, the tragedy didn't stop when the plane hit the ground. The impact was actually just the beginning of a whole second disaster that started to unfold on the ground. Remember all that fuel we mentioned for the long haul to Honolulu? Well, on impact, it basically became a bomb. The wreckage just erupted into a massive inferno that started spreading incredibly fast. This fire was so intense, so out of control, that it jumped from the crash site and completely engulfed nearby warehouses. Emergency crews, of course, rushed in, and they were battling this thing for hours. It was so dangerous they had to shut down parts of the airport just to try and contain the chaos. All right, so behind all the technical details, behind the fire and the wreckage, is the part of the story that truly matters the most, the human cost. We really need to take a moment here to acknowledge the victims of this awful tragedy. On board that aircraft, there were 3 dedicated crew members, and tragically, all 3 of them lost their lives in the crash. It's so important that we remember them by their names: Captain Richard Wartenberg, First Officer Lee Truitt, and Relief Captain Dana Diamond, 3 professionals who were lost just doing their jobs. And the heartbreak didn't stop with the crew. The crash and that massive fire also claimed lives on the ground. Initially, officials feared the death toll could be as high as 12 people in total. On top of the fatalities, another 11 people were hospitalized, many of them with very severe burn injuries. It just shows you how wide the circle of this disaster really was. So in the middle of all this chaos and tragedy, the most urgent question always starts to bubble up. Why? Why did this happen? The search for answers kicked off almost immediately, and it led to a really complex investigation. And the main agency leading that charge is the NTSB. That's the National Transportation Safety Board. If you're not familiar, these are the experts. They're the ones responsible for investigating pretty much every civil transportation accident in the U.S. to figure out what went wrong. And pretty quickly, their early findings started pointing to something absolutely chilling: a failure of the engine mount. We're talking about the critical structure that literally bolts the massive engine onto the wing. The evidence was suggesting it may have just fractured, causing the whole engine to rip clean off the aircraft right after takeoff. As the investigation was getting underway, UPS, of course, issued a statement. They expressed their deep sorrow for the loss of their crew, and, importantly, they promised their full cooperation with the NTSB, which is a crucial step because the investigators needed total access to maintenance records, flight data, everything. You know, as awful as these events are, they are often the moments where we learn the most about how to prevent them from ever happening again. The investigation into Flight 2976 uncovered some really key lessons for the entire aviation industry. So when you boil it all down, there were really 3 huge lessons that came out of this. First off, it was a brutal reminder of just how dangerous a structural failure is during takeoff, the most vulnerable part of any flight. Second, it hammered home the absolute, non-negotiable importance of rigorous maintenance. And finally, it was a stark wake-up call about the immense fire hazard that these long-haul cargo planes represent.
And that really brings us to our final thought here. An incident like this forces all of us to ask a really important question about the future. I mean, aviation is already incredibly safe, right? But what new systems, what better inspection methods, what smarter designs can we create to make it even safer, to make sure a tragedy like this can never, ever happen again?